So ladies and gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us this morning at beautiful Fayetteville State University for the Military Legislative Panel. Thank you to all of the senior leaders that are here in the audience, and students and faculty members of this university and others. Thank you very much for joining us in this very important event. My name is Joe Billingsly, U.S. Army Major, and also founder and president of the Military Cyber Professionals Association. I'm very, very honored this morning to introduce you to this panel of extremely distinguished professionals. I'll provide a very brief introduction of each one, and if you'd like a more robust biography, you can find that on the event website. After the introductions, each of the panelists will have about 10 minutes each to give their perspective on this very important topic area, then followed by questions and answers from the audience. So to start with, we have Vice Admiral Jan Tighe, Commander of U.S. Fleet Cyber Command, the 10th Fleet, and also my former university president. Next, we have Brigadier General Mitchel Kilgo, G6 CIO of U.S. Forces Command, and also former brigade commander of mine, sir. Colonel Donald Bray, commander of the U.S. Army Cyber Protection Brigade. Mr. Kenyatta Wesley, deputy of the DOD OSBP for Technology and Innovation. Captain Andrew Tucci, Chief of the Coast Guard's Office of Port and Faculty Compliance, Facility Compliance at the U.S. Coast Guard Headquarters. Mr. Meldon Hollis, Associate Director at the White House Initiative on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And finally, Mr. John Schlieffen, Vice President and CTO for L3 National Security Solutions, Defense Solutions Sector. With that, Admiral Tighe.
I don't know if I don't need an on button. O-N-O-F-F. I'm a technological whiz. You see that right now. So good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm a little reluctant to follow Dr. Lemnios. That was so well done. I really appreciated that discussion. In fact, in a lot of cases, I'll be able to link why I'm in the position I'm in with points that he made and sort of where we're going. I thought it would be important, first and foremost, though, to give you a sense of the command and how the Navy's approaching the problem in cyberspace really quickly. I am at Fleet Cyber Command. I report directly to the Chief of Naval Operations, but he's not my only boss. I am the component commander to U.S. Cyber Command, Admiral Rogers. And I am also his component commander under his hat as the National Security Agency, Central Security Service. Finally, my last boss is the U.S. STRATCOM commander, Admiral Haney, and my relationship to him is through operating the Navy's portion of the space constellation, so as a space component to STRATCOM. So, as you can tell, I have multiple jobs, including cyber. We have responsibilities at Fleet Cyber Command for signals intelligence, for electronic warfare, for information operations, and as I said, for the operation of the Navy space constellation. Talking a little bit more specifically about cyberspace, whether we like it or not, cyberspace is an operational domain of war. Just like the maritime and air and space domain, it has to be protected and defended, and we will be capable of delivering effects through it. For the U.S. Navy, freedom of action in cyberspace is especially important because we operate forward, and cyberspace is a necessary component of all missions that we undertake. Winning wars, deterring aggression, and maintaining the freedom of the seas. And so as the supported commander, I direct the operational forces that secure and protect and defend U.S. Navy networks as part of a larger DoD network. So that's the supported commander in me. There's also, as you can imagine, a supporting role that I play to all the other operational commanders in the United States Navy. And really, all operational commanders play both of these roles in some aspects of their being. I execute my mission through a subordinate task force structure, just like many other operational commanders. We have 22 commands around the globe, and I have a single staff supporting the multiple hats and multiple responsibilities that we have. My forces are always on, 24/7, and this mission never sleeps. We strive to operate the Navy networks as a warfighting platform. And when you think about warfighting platforms in the Navy, you think about ships and submarine and aircraft. We want to operate our network as if it is a warfighting platform. It is a warfighting platform. It is under attack, and it must be defended, as I said. As Dr. Lemnio said, we didn't buy it as a warfighting platform. We didn't put the thought and the architectural design into it in a way that would allow it to be easily defended. And so that poses a whole lot of challenge for us. We also didn't procure it in a way or budget for the networks in a way that we could easily sustain it, as new vulnerabilities are discovered, rapidly deploy fixes, rebaseline operating systems, those kinds of things. So in the operation of the network as a warfighting platform, we have to make it available to all those who depend on it. We have to defend it from intrusion, exploitation, and attack, and when necessary, we have to fight through those attacks with our warfighting partners for operational missions. As you can read about anywhere, adversaries are rapidly acquiring pretty sophisticated tools, and they know how to use them. Success for us in operating the network as a platform means winning every day against every adversary. Any particular adversary that seeks to get into our network only has to find one way in. And so it's a lot easier to be on offense than it is to be on the defense here. The interesting part of this warfighting platform is while I'm the supported commander, I don't control all aspects of risk that pertain to that platform. And so we think of the risk that we have in our networks as the intrusion attack surface. And Dr. Lemnios referred to that as well, I think, as the threat footprint. So what is the opportunity that we present to adversaries to gain a foothold in our network? The attack surface, and again, I don't have full control over that, changes based on a whole lot of different things, which is why I don't have control. We have users on our network that plug things in that shouldn't be plugged in. Their iPods, their iPads, all of those potential personal devices introduce risk into our network. Malware can jump that gap and get into the Navy warfighting platform. We have issues with allowing users to go to places in cyberspace that are not safe places from a malware perspective. And so users online, unwittingly or unknowingly, going to some of these locations, open encrypted channels to adversaries to bring malware into our network. Our acquisition system, again, Dr. Lemnios referred to DoD 5000, the very deliberate way in which we procure and get the most bang for the DoD buck is very fairly slow in trying to achieve that. And so the result is, as new systems are created and new applications are created, over the course of the development of any individual program, new vulnerabilities are discovered, and many times those systems deliver with vulnerabilities that have been known about for some period of time. Additionally, we have to consider what kinds of malware or malicious opportunity exists in the supply chain, where we procure our equipment from. And so, as a service, we are looking to reduce that opportunity through, what is called cyber hygiene, through the education of our users to the threat, through better DoD acquisition processes that account for cybersecurity from the beginning, in architecture, in how we sustain, and very much so, our program managers and acquisition are measured in terms of the cost of a program, the schedule of it delivering, and the performance. You could think of the cybersecurity goodness as a subset of performance, but the reality is if we don't highlight that more explicitly and use the acquisition system to measure how we're doing in delivering secure and well-architected systems, we're never going to get ahead of this problem because, as described, the adversaries are moving so fast here, and we're quite bogged down. So, working on reducing that attack surface and the opportunity, and then on top of that, we have layered defenses that we operate. From the boundary to the internet. And again, as the DoD, we have some advantage here where we can control our network, our internet connections, if you will. So from the boundary of the internet down to the boundary with the Navy enclave, all the way down to any individual host on our network, we employ layers of sensors to detect adversaries in our network, malicious activity going on. We employ analysts to look at the data coming back, and we employ countermeasures to take automated action when we detect known bad activity. All of these sensors and data get back to the issue that Dr. Limnios was talking about. We've got to be able to bring that data together in a way that empowers us to take rapid action. We have that in individual services. We're moving towards it as a whole of DoD, but we're not there yet. And again, some of that is how long it takes us to get to what is the common data strategy for cyber defensive information. How do we bring that information together with network operations information to be more powerful in our defense of the DoD network? And truthfully, the defense of our nation is not sufficient to only protect DoD networks. So the question becomes, how do we share that knowledge and information across the United States government and with industry and other sectors across the nation to be more powerful in our ability to defend against this ever-increasing need? So with that, I think I will relinquish the rest of my time to my fellow panel members, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. General Kilgo.
So good morning. So first of all, let me just say what a pleasure it is to be here this morning to be on this distinguished panel and to really offer a perspective that is what I believe is probably slightly different from what most of us are accustomed to dealing with when we're talking about cyber and cyber defense. So as the Chief Information Officer at U.S. Forces Command, my primary focus and job is really to produce forces, ready forces, trained forces that are responsible for providing the network, and the network that the warfighter will fight upon, regardless of what uniform or agency that they belong to. Because FORSCOM's mission is providing forces to combatant commanders, ready trained forces. So my boss's priority deals with readiness and how well we're trained. And he has a number of supporting priorities. But in such, then my priority is delivering forces that provide secure networks, enabling what we call mission command. So a commander's ability to be able to maneuver freely on the battlefield and as we say in the Army, put steel on targets. for effectiveness, decisive action. And so that is a pretty different thing from how we think of the network from a strategic standpoint. When you get down at a tactical level, what we call echelons at core and below, there's a couple of things that, from our standpoint, that I'm most focused on, and that is the protection of the information, really as it pertains to location, and the protection of information as it pertains to the what. Where am I, or where are my forces, and what are they intending to do? Those two things are very critical to the forces that we support. Within the Army, 80% of those forces that provide the network at the tactical level, pushing forward, resides within FORSCOM. And so it's very critical that we maintain that force and maintain the services that they provide. And so right now, today, as we have evolved in how we look at cyber, the Army has postured itself, I believe, very well in the strategic environment by what it's producing with its tactical forces and cyber forces, what it's done in a strategic environment through its net operations centers and its CERTs and now regional cyber centers. So they've postured, and there's been a lot of work on defense in depth and data and analytics and correlating data to determine where the bad guys are on our networks. We've done that, I think, or postured ourselves as we continue to improve very well at the strategic level. But when you get down, if you think about a lot of the charts that you see that really talk about the network, and folks talk about the warfighter in a joint integrated picture, and you'll see a carrier or a tank or an aircraft. Most of the times from that big strategic thing that you see, below that, you'll see a lightning bolt, and all of a sudden you'll see that tactical edge. And so that tactical edge is something that we have not paid as much attention to as we need to. We've looked at that to some extent as being a separate virtual network, if you will, available when it's connected through the strategic enterprise and typically tunneled and protected and other things are done. But it's a very, very fertile environment for adversaries if they're able to penetrate and get into that network. So when we connect that tactical network in through, from an Army perspective, through a regional hub node that exists in various theaters around the world, through our own tactical hub nodes, if it touches at some point the strategic environment, then it's vulnerable. And the next part of that most vulnerable threat is the insider threat. The Admiral talked about what people do and what they plug into the network. Anytime that type of thing happens in a tactical network, it opens up a door. And so once that door is open, at any time that it connects to the outside world, then there's an opportunity for something to happen in our environment. And through our training, we have the world-class cyber op 4 that will come out and do things to us on our network. Typically, they start into the network to help us with our defenses and teach us the types of things that we don't know. But we have assumed over the years that it's going to take them some time to penetrate that network, and that's not always the case. And so what I'd like to kind of dig into a little bit is at that echelon at core and below, what we're really talking about, where the warfighter resides and where we're putting still on target, and then leveraging everything behind that to assist us with being able to operate in a contested cyber environment, because we know it's going to be contested, but to operate in that environment and just changing the culture a little bit and the thought and the way that we think about it. At this tactical level, we think about delivering a network, installing it, operating, and maintaining the network, and the information assurance that goes along with that. But when we're dealing with information assurance, we're primarily talking about patching our practices and things of that sort. We haven't really gotten to the point where we're really talking about the cyber aspect, where we are now leveraging that data that's in the tactical networks and correlating that data to the point where we can see events and things that are going on in a tactical network. We think about that network in terms of, is it there? Is it up? Is it able to be utilized? And what I tell our young signaleers in the Army is, when you think about the network in that fashion and you pat yourself on the back and you say, I'm good to go, it's there, they can use it. You're wrong, you're only 50% there. Because the applications that run on that network are more critical or just as critical as the network itself. So if the network is great and we have that sense that it's protected, but the applications, which is some of the most vulnerable things on our network, which creates that hole for adversaries to get in most cases, if that's not good, if it's not working, it's no use to the warfighter because they can't correlate events on the battlefield. But if it's exposed and there's an adversary in it, they can understand what we're doing and what we're about to do. And that's what we have to change the culture down at the lower level. So as you look and think about delivering applications, delivering tool sets, delivering equipment to the warfighter, again, at core and below, think about the impact that it has in that environment. Everything that works well in the strategic environment does not work well in the tactical environment because I have much less bandwidth. My forces that I train, they rotate all the time. And I get an ace who is very capable of doing things on the network from a doting ops as well as a security standpoint, and then they're gone to the next duty station. I don't have the civilian workforce for the continuity to maintain that expertise at that level. And the expert soldiers that I'm getting and utilizing that are excellent at operating the network and have evolved to being excellent at securing the network. This guy that's going to talk to you next on my left is stealing a large part of that talent to do what's most critical, and that's protect that network from the cyber point. So as we evolve and begin to get more soldiers out of the schoolhouse and back down at the lower levels that help us do this new thing that we haven't thought about in that way before, we get better in operations and protecting data. Some of the tools that run on the strategic side, for instance, like a host-based security system, we refer to HBSS, it works great out there. It's very complex, it's very hard to tune. Now you take that and it's a lot of data that it sucks up. Now bring that down into the tactical environment, and we're in the process of implementing that at those lower levels now. The overhead associated with that application could chew up all the data or all the bandwidth that I have available to push information, critical information to warfighters. The complexity in getting that thing tuned right, if I mess that up, I break those applications and those mission command systems that supports those commanders, and they're unable to see themselves, and that's my most critical concern, being able to see where my friendly forces are, where the adversary is, and from this perspective, more importantly, being able to see the cyber information associated with that network that I'm providing. And so we need fusion down at this level, tools that are simple and easy and helps us correlate data that gives my warfighters a picture of what's happening in that environment so that commanders can make decisions. And one thing commanders do is always accept risk in operations. And what we have to do as a community is get the commanders to the point where they can mitigate those risks as much as they can and provide the information that gives them the vision. And then they can make a decision in that fog of war and accept those risks and things that we need to do so that we can be effective at the end. Because if we fail, there will be no strategic forces or no strategic network, because it's all gone to our adversaries. Some of the things that we're doing in FORSCOM to kind of help us get after some of these concerns and embrace this new culture of cyber down at the tactical level. We have a program called Information or Installation as a Docking Station, where we've partnered with the Army's Network Enterprise Command, NETCOM, that owns all the garrison-based NECs, as we call them, Network Enterprise Centers, that provides the network down at that level. And what we're accomplishing by executing this program is we're now taking those services, those mission command systems that at one point in time we used to deploy with them, bring them home, lock them up, pull them out when we train with them, lock them back up, deploy with them again. And so we're tackling two issues, cybersecurity and readiness. So we're partnering with Netcom and the NEX to put those servers and services on the network so that they're there all the time. And we're leveraging the strategic infrastructure to get them there and get them on the network. So now units can train on them all the time. They can build their products and they're always there. And then we can also secure them better, keep them patched, take a different approach where we're now looking at the network like we look at intelligence and having an IPB, intelligence preparation of the battlefield, on the network, where I'm talking to commanders now what key critical assets are to the network, most key, most vulnerable, and talking to them about what now I see as a vulnerability to this critical asset, and getting the assistance and the support and the resources that I need to secure those assets so that, again, the commander accepts less risk. And that program, we're doing that across all compos. And when I say compos, I mean active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. We've made great progress on the active component in the National Guard, and we're now beginning at our critical reserve locations to do those similar types of things. We are developing and institutionalizing home station mission command centers, where now commanders doesn't have to be deployed or in a field in a training environment to stand up their tactical operations centers. It's built into the infrastructure. It's there all the time, and they're always operating from it. So we can push forces forward and not have to push as much forward. But what's important and key in that is that means the network, the infrastructure has to be there to support that type of split-based operation. So commanders can really command and control from the rear and push only the minimal things we need to push forward, not push all those servers and applications forward, keep them back at the rear and leverage them through the network. We're also working through with our cyber and various other partners a cyber palette, where we're looking at across the whole platform, doctrine, manning, resources, training, all those things that we plan efforts against in the Army. And we're looking at our structure of personnel down in the tactical environment, as well as the resources and the things we have in the developing CONOPS to help us, again, change the culture and execute cyber effectively in the tactical environment. And we're also, and lastly, one of the things that we're doing is we're working to leverage the regional cyber centers that the Army has in all theaters across our footprint, because right now they're oriented and focused up and out. And where I need them focused as well is down and in, at least at some tier, providing me information and network. Good for them, because I'm providing them data now to correlate against things that's happening in the strategic environment, and I'm bringing them down to the edge on the battlefield. And now they're helping me see myself, and we're working through that palette now. And that's going to be a win-win for us, because even though we say it's one integrated network, it's still a hybrid right now. And at in-state, what we want is a truly integrated network where at the highest level, a 4-star commander can be briefed on, here's what we see, here's what we know. And it's the same story that a company commander or a company S6 is briefing to his battalion or brigade commander about an operation prepared to accept risk. Now, what we need from industry, what we need from academia, it's been said, we need people. We need trained, ready people, minds prepared to be ingenious and think differently and look at a problem and be able to map that out, which means you got to have a hard science skill sets to go behind that. I need them in the officer ranks, I need them in the enlisted ranks, and I need to be able to grow that talent, and I need a pool to be able to pull that talent from. And we need that desperately. And we need standards-based solution when it talks to equipment and things that execute. And as I mentioned earlier, what works here not necessarily works better at the lowest level. So we need partnerships where I can help you understand the environment that at Forces Command we fight in every day, which is really different from the environment that you fight in industry and corporations and at the strategic level of DoD. I'll stop there and I'll entertain your questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, General Kilgo. Colonel Bray.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Fayetteville State University for giving me an opportunity to participate in this panel. It's venues like this that give me a chance to get outside of my normal DoD environment and interact with academia and private industry and the community on a shared interest in a common area. I'm going to start by giving you a little background on what I do for the Army, and then I'm going to walk through my challenges I see organizationally and the challenges I see in the environment that we operate each day. I'm going to use the framework of people, technology, and processes when I talk about those challenges. But for the Army, I have the responsibility of producing teams that defends the Army and Department of Defense networks. In the DoD space, we call our cyber activities cyberspace operations, and we have multiple type of teams in that arena. I'm responsible for building the defensive teams that have to defend the networks against malicious activities, malicious actors, unauthorized activities, could be insider threat, and malicious software. In doing that, the biggest challenge is finding the right people. Obviously, I've heard that multiple times. Less about finding the right technical skill sets. We know what they are. Finding that population that's available to recruit from is a different challenge. In my perspective, if I'm charged with defending the network, I have to have a reliable workforce as well as a technical workforce. So when I'm looking at people, I'm not only looking at it from a technical standpoint, I'm looking from a whole person standpoint. And we're working on ways to not only analyze and assess a person's technical capabilities, but ensure that he fits with the organizational values and that he can be trusted with the skills and access and responsibility we're going to levy upon that person. And that's a little harder challenge than finding just the technical skills. Obviously, industry, academia, and the Department of Defense are all competing for the same workforce. And so finding those skills is difficult. From the defensive standpoint, I'm really looking for, as you heard earlier, critical thinking, problem solver, and creative thinkers. But analytical personnel, data scientists, data analysts, script writers. In my arena, I don't have to necessarily produce software or application for the customers, but I do have to be able to analyze that software and understand that, is it operating properly? Are there potential vulnerabilities? And most importantly, pull data off of those particular packages. In our arena, most defensive software and application has three roles. It's an administrator, someone who operates and provides services on a daily basis. Have an auditor role, someone who can come in and inspect that appliance or that system for proper compliance and regulatory requirements. And then you have the analyst, the person who can pull data off of that and take a look at it and look for vulnerabilities and offer mitigation and response actions to or best business practices. That latter role is the role that the workforce that we're looking for has to be able to do. So we obviously need students and personnel who are well studied in STEM environment, but the perfect person that I would be looking for is someone who has the foundation with STEM, but also can think in an abstract way and perform that analyst role of the data sets and applications we would deal with on a daily basis. Additionally, personnel that we're looking for in our workforce have to be not only team players, but quite often they have to be able to rapidly respond to a changing environment. As we know, cyber is an ever-changing environment, and the adversary techniques constantly change. They have less rigid standards and less processes we have to go through. And so we have to be able to quickly assess the situation, determine the risks, and recommend some type of mitigating actions. So you have to think quickly on your feet. As I move forward to processes, there's a few processes that we deal with on a daily basis. I think we can relook for new innovative ways to improve these processes as we move forward that will help us better defend our networks as we live along. Obviously, we need a layered defense strategy. We have that, a defense in-depth strategy, both in industry and DoD. But we need to relook that strategy or how we employ it. Typically today is some type of concentric circle or a succession of firewalls or layers. In our current environment, as things continue to move to the enterprise and the cloud, and the ecosystem gets larger and vulnerabilities get larger, we're going to have to take a different approach. The current layer of defense strategy is primarily focusing on protection, and we're going to have to really hone our skill on detection. We're going to have to go in with the assumption that we will be compromised as long as we're trying to communicate out. So we're going to have to form the skills, the personnel, and the TTPs and processes to quickly detect intrusions or anomalous activities and respond. And in doing so, we have to have a defensive strategy that allows us to facilitate that. And quite often, our current strategy makes it hard for the response force to maneuver on the force on the network just because the numerous enclaves and firewalls. We also have to relook our current accession strategy, obviously. We have to be able to assess and acquire defensive tools and TTPs a little quicker so we can compete with leap ahead technology and disruptive technologies and new TTPs that the adversary is using against us. We also need to relook the way we protect our data. For the most part, we're applying equal protection to all data. We're protecting the network and where the data reside. We have to have a way to identify what's critical and offer a different level of protection for that data and not the network, but the data itself. And so we're going to have to look for process and technologies to help us do that. And last, we need to improve from a process standpoint, improve our ability to do predictive analysis. We have to focus our workforce and our effort more on active defense, and to do that in a meaningful way, we have to be better at predictive analysis and kind of understand the motive, means, and opportunities and the capabilities of the actors out there and predict what we think will occur and have appropriate plans in place for that. From a technology standpoint, there's a few things I think we need to work on and improve. One is actually our data encryption tools and capabilities. We have to have more of them that are scalable and that we can rapidly employ and still provide the service we need to the customer base. We also need to look at the ability to have some type of time to live on the data that we use. Most of the data we have has a useful period of time that data is relevant, but it kind of resides in the network of multiple places for much longer than that. So it has to have a way to move the data to the appropriate place, and when it's no longer needed, that data has a time to live and goes away in a automated fashion. Also, we have to look at better processes and tools to address the insider threat. That's the most difficult threat we would deal with on a daily basis, just because we've given them the privileges and the right and access they need to do their job. But if they decide to use their access for malicious activities or unauthorized activities, every activity that is unauthorized is not malicious. They could just be trying to access YouTube or some other site that you don't want them to do. We have to have better tools and processes to help us automate that threat, and so we can find it. As well as lastly, and before I proceed the rest of my time here, lastly, we have to have a good strategy and process and technologies to help us with data analytics. The amount of data and the speed of network and the size of the architecture with cloud enterprises, it makes it very difficult for the defenders as well as the customer to rapidly access the data they need or make sense out of the data that they're looking at. So we have to have better tools and technologies and processes, they're all tied together, to allow us to look at that data and pull out the pieces of the data that's relevant for that situation that you're using. From a defensive standpoint, without big data analytics and the ability to rapidly look at a large amount of data and pick out the piece that's critical in a rapid fashion will be detrimental to our ability to defend as we move forward. And so that's kind of a summary of the challenges I see organizationally and where I think we need to focus our energies. And I look forward to the engagement in the question section.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wesley?
Good morning, everyone. All right, I'm going to take a little bit different approach for some of this. I've been listening to my distinguished panel members up here. I am the acting director for the Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs. And one of my charters is to change the way people think, as well as change the way you think about what you think when you hear small business and academia and how it can be used within the department. And what I want to do is I want to kind of talk to the students for a second. When I sit down and I hear what my panel members are asking for, I think it's important to realize that as we start thinking through our challenges as a department, it's not always the adults who will help us change that. It's these students that you see sitting next to you in this room right now. And I'm talking to the Fayetteville State University staff, to the teachers of these high school students. You have to understand that when you're going to work with children, you're shaping the minds for how we are going to have to work with and who will be coming in to lead us and take care of us in the future. These students are coming in unscathed right now. They don't know what they're not supposed to be able to do. And it's important to keep them that way. When I sit down and I hear my commanders to my right, and what I'm sure my commanders to the left are going to tell you, is that they need critical thinkers. They need people who can think differently and solve challenges. Well, if you strap them with a bunch of what they cannot do, what they're not supposed to be able to do, you will cripple our ability to take care of you in the future. So it's important to understand that what these students are going to try to do, what they're going to learn how to do, they're going to do it, and they're going to take all of the lessons and things that we've learned today, and they're going to improve it. The software capabilities that we have to give them access to, they're not just learning how to use it, they're learning how to fix it. They're learning how to improve it. Because the more they break down the software code in the back of it, they will be smarter with helping us fix things before they break. I'm in charge of what in the department is the largest small business innovation research program. It's actually the largest in the federal government with over $2 billion. And its main focus is to help these commanders find technology or improve technology. Its other focus is to fix challenges before they happen. It's not a basic research program. It's to take things like the Abrams tank. It's to take things like the F-35 or the F-18 and actually take all of the tools, the electronics, the warfare, the sensors, the software technology that's in it, and actually solve the challenges before our adversaries do. Well, the people who will be doing that is a combination of you today, but these students that will be working with us in the future. Being able to sit down and look at a cyber topic and sit it down in front of not just MIT students, but students in high school and see what ideas they come up with. For some of you who have been researching challenges and research and development challenges and that have been going on, you'll find out that the majority of the winners are not adults. Majority of the winners are college students and high school students. What does that tell you? It's that it's not because they necessarily are smarter than we are. They think differently. They're not afraid to take risk. And we sometimes have become risk adverse instead of being able to take calculated risk and understand what our challenges can also help us fix. One of the things that these commanders have also said is they need people who can work in teams. Understanding that it's not just working and taking a test that will help these students learn and solve problems. It's about interaction and understanding what the student next to them is capable of and understanding what they can do to leverage each other. Sometimes getting the answers to the test is not a problem. It's actually the roadmap and the methodology that they use to get the answers to the test that help them learn. And I think that everyone in here has to understand that that also helps us in the department in the future. Because having people who can work together in teams doesn't start at 25. It doesn't start at 30. It starts in 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. Mathematics is going to be imperative for you students. You heard it said 3, 4, 5 times. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. One of my jobs is to sit on the board of directors with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Staffen, who's the director of research for the department. And we are chartering a STEM program in which we believe that we'll take these gentlemen and the young ladies here on the panel into the future by preparing students that they will have access to help continue to solve the department's future challenges. And I think what we have to do is continue to shape how we think and evolve and not be afraid to tell that we have a problem, that we have a challenge, so that way we can continue to solve them. Because if we keep the problems a secret, then we do not have access to the minds who can help us fix them. So I ask all of you to consider how you are training and teaching these students. Think of innovative ways to talk to them and get through to them, and equip them with the technology they need and the software they need early, because it is important to the future of where we go, not just the Department of Defense, but when I think about Homeland Security, Department of Energy, even Department of Agriculture. You people don't think about how technology affects the food we eat, the medical career field. And so I'm here to kind of urge you to think a little bit differently. I'm here to sit here and tell you that when you need to, if you're a company and a business in this room, you need to look at how the department is going to be buying and spending money in the future. I mentioned this last night in the keynote. Better Buying Power 3.0 is something that you all should be looking for. Take a time to read it. Not just read the bullets that are on the page, but how we are going to implement it, because it affects how we spend money and how you're going to have to bid for work in the future. One of my other charters is to help these commanders find technology, get access to companies and academia who can help solve these problems. And I am fully committed to doing that for them. As a person who wore the uniform and sat with them, I understand the challenges that they have to live with. And I understand the fiscal environment that we are now in and that we will be in for a little while. And that means each of you need to be very clear to understand that Better Buying Power 3.0 has a major emphasis on technology that includes not just cyber, but other technologies and challenges that we have as well, to include infrastructure of repairing the network, to make these commanders' lives a little bit easier when it comes to being able to find resources to improve their situations. Understanding the challenges of where we're going to go will help you develop how you're going to invest in your companies and how academia and universities will be able to shape topics for students to learn. You must understand where we are going so that way you can go with us and help us lead the way.
Fighting drug wars and things like that in the United States and elsewhere. And cyber is a big part of that. But believe me, the folks that are smuggling, so forth, they're using cyber technology to do that. And so we need to figure out, hey, how can we counter that? How can we exploit that? How can we anticipate that? A couple of comments that many of my panelists made in terms of predictive analytics, initiative, teamwork, leadership. All of that is needed in the cyber world with the Coast Guard. So the Coast Guard, we were heavily involved also not only with fleet operations, but with the merchant marine fleet, U.S. and foreign. Port operations, I work a lot in that world myself right now, so think about all the ports and terminals in the United States. They rely heavily and increasingly on cyber technology, so everything from container yards that are keeping track of every container that's coming and going off of that yard, via cyber technology, scheduling even the trucks and the trains to pick them up. Think of refineries on the coast, pipeline operations, industrial control systems, liquefied natural gas. All of these operations are controlled now increasingly by cyber technology. Not only cyber technology, but network cyber technology. So where perhaps years ago it was a standalone system, now that's a network system. Think about all the technology. Who here has ever been on a cruise ship? Probably a few of you have been on cruise ships. So cruise ships are very sophisticated vessels. They use cyber technology to do everything from navigation, GPS, I'll talk about that in a minute, down to the stability of the ship, watertight doors, fire detection, the propulsion plant on a cruise ship, and many other, in fact, most modern merchant ships today, they've got an engine room, which is really a computer bank. And in many cases, the software for those engine management systems the updates for that are driven remotely from some remote location. Plus, of course, you've got the vulnerabilities, and a couple folks here have mentioned it, of simply, perhaps less savvy crew member plugging in his or her smartphone into that $1 million computer system and accidentally uploading malware, and all of a sudden everything goes south. So you can see we've got a lot of vulnerabilities. So this matters to the U.S. economy. All right, obviously, all our ports and terminals are vital to the global trade across the country, and our economy, our way of life. They could also be very disruptive in terms of if we're trying to do a loadout for an overseas contingency operation to get the fleet out. Well, we've got a problem in a port. That's a problem for the military as well as the private sector. And so we've got to anticipate that, figure out how to counter that, figure out how to recover from it if it does happen. Because, as, again, many people have mentioned here, we're probably not going to be able to prevent everything that happens, so we'd better have some recovery plans. Got to be resilient as well. Let me talk a little bit about GPS. Probably everybody here has used GPS, right? Raise your hand if you've not used GPS, okay? So it's just one aspect of this, but it's worth mentioning. So it's a satellite-based system, so by the time that satellite signal gets down here to Earth, it's at the milliwatt level in terms of power, which means it's ridiculously easy to jam, all right? I mean, the $25 product you stick into the cigarette lighter of your car could jam a GPS signal. In fact, it's done so many times. We've seen that many times. More sophisticated operation could be, cover a broader area. And so we've seen GPS failures by various sources in U.S. ports, where, for example, again, a container yard that is not only using a computer system to track the location, but is using GPS to physically watch things move around and move them around, well, that system goes down. And of course, outside at sea, particularly in the entrance to an area, GPS goes down, all of a sudden all the ships are not quite sure where to go. Now they all, of course, have the ability to navigate without that, but at the capacity you need, at the speed, at the reliability, maybe not so much. So that's a problem. And of course, then those systems, not only do they have the GPS system itself, but again, network systems everywhere. So the charting system on board those ships are electronic. They have software independent of the GPS itself, but it's all connected. The radar, the gyro, everything there together. So again, everything from a jamming situation could be done without much sophistication to an accidental upload of malware into something that's operating a ship or a port terminal. Could cause a lot of problems, disruptions, perhaps even damage, death, injury, oil spills. All those things are possible. We've seen GPS spoofing as well, where you can feed a false signal to a ship and convince it's somewhere where it isn't, causing either the autopilot or the crew to change course when they don't realize what's going on. So should this happen in the vicinity of a fleet operation, that could be quite a surprise to everybody on board both vessels. We've seen, we've got a whole range of threats, and that's been mentioned a couple times, from the advanced persistent threat, the nation states, all the way down to, again, just malware that's not necessarily even targeted for something, but can impact an operation, all the way down to simple technical error. Some of the more interesting things we've seen, I'm sure the Admiral remembers the day when the Russian trawlers used to shadow our fleet operations. These were, Soviet fishing vessels with an unusually large number of, antennas and so forth on board for a commercial fishing boat. Well, we still sort of see the modern version of that today, and we found on ocean-going commercial ships that come into our ports, we found very powerful Wi-Fi systems. We found often with the antenna concealed underneath a navigation light or somewhere else on board. We found them with password cracking software on board, on computers and so forth. So again, we've got a full range of threats out there that are trying to impact our commercial maritime operations, our port operations, our commerce. They're looking for ways to burrow into our systems, whether they're government systems or private sector systems, to often, of course, to gain, financial leverage, proprietary information. In other cases, certainly to look for ways to essentially push buttons and make things happen that we don't want to have happen. So, big concern for the Coast Guard. So, we've been working heavily with the Department of Homeland Security, of course, with the National Institutes of Standards and Training. So they've got the the NIST framework. Some of you may be familiar with that, National Institutes of Standards. So we've been trying to encourage, particularly the maritime industry folks, to recognize this threat, and we're trying to work with them to improve their cybersecurity practices. It'll strengthen the nation as a whole. And of course, as I mentioned before, we're trying to defend our own networks and trying to leverage our cyber capabilities, to advance our operations in the law enforcement, defense, and other realms. So what does the Coast Guard need? We need people that can do all of those things for us. So if you've got an interest in any of those areas and you can work in teams and you've been good at your math and science, join the Coast Guard. We need you on board.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Hollis?
Good morning. My name is Meldon Hollis. I am the Associate Director of the White House Initiative for Historically Black Colleges and Universities. In that office, our job is to look around the federal government to see what resources we can find for support of historically black colleges. If I could just spend 1 minute or two and talk about those institutions. There are about 100 of those institutions in the country. But the important thing from our perspective is that these institutions make up less than 3% of the institutions of higher education in the United States, but they provide 20% of the African Americans in this country with degrees in engineering, 33% of the African Americans in this country with degrees in mathematics, 35% of those with degrees in physical sciences, and 25% of those with degrees in computer sciences. I will get back to the issue of the demographic revolution that has taken place in this country and what implications that has for anyone who wants to think about how we diversify the technological workforce in this country. To go to a joke that my grandfather once told me. My grandfather was born in 1891. He's been gone now for about 20 years. But the joke is a guy who's from the city who's lost and who ends up in the yard of a farmer. And he's trying to get to some city, and he asks the farmer how to get there. And he describes where it is, and the farmer leans back, and he thinks about it for a minute, and he says, you can't get there from here. So the point that I want to make is that if you take a look at the demographics of this country, and I just want to make one or two important points. And this year, the public school system has slipped to the point where the majority of students in the public school system of the United States are no longer white students. We talk about the year 2040 when the population will shift, but that's not the important number for the United States. As of 2018, the majority of youngsters in this country below the age of 18 will no longer be white students. I don't say that in a way to be offensive. I just say that in a way that folks are going to have to deal with some very real issues if we're going to think about how we meet the needs of this country, both in the commercial sector and the defense sector. Within my office, the three areas where I work are on science and engineering programs. I work on international programs, and I work in an area that has a couple of slashes in it: emergency management, homeland security, and public safety. They come together in some very interesting ways. Like Dr. Limnios, I spent a lot of time in Brazil. Brazil has decided to fund 100,000 students to study science and technology because they have come up against a fence, which is if the economy is to expand, they're going to have to expand the technological workforce. You just can't do it if you don't have the workforce that's necessary to handle the technological needs. So they funded 100,000 scholarships. So we pay the whole thing. They pay the travel. That is to study outside of Brazil. I'm sorry, that's to study outside of Brazil. It's called a Science Mobility Program. One of the things that is of interest to Brazil was since 90 million Brazilians of African descent, that's 3 times the number you find in this country, and they make up half of the population of Brazil. Brazil has figured out that they cannot do what they want to do unless they reach very deeply into the Afro-Brazilian population. And they're fascinated about this idea of historically black colleges and universities. And to that degree, they have entered into an agreement with an alliance of historically black colleges and universities to send their students for training in technological areas. If we have reviewed their applications, 70% of those students are either going to be trained in engineering or computer science. I raise that because one of the companies that we think should have an interest in this agreement has been IBM. That has come up in a couple of conversations. And I raise that because there's somebody here I should probably raise that with. I have talked to someone in his office on other occasions, Evelyn Kent, on more than one occasion, about the relationship between the Defense Department and HBCUs and some relationships. There on my wall, well, what I do in our office is I am really a senior management analyst. My idea is, my job is to think about large and universal trends that affect education and some other interests in this country. And I have on my wall 6 universal trends that I will mention to you here. One is the demographic shift that's taking place in this United States and what that means for our national security, what that means for our economy. Another is globalization. I've just mentioned how that sort of overlaps with this interest. Another one is the technological innovation, and that's what you've been talking about. This cybersecurity thing is part of a technological revolution that's taking place. And I'd just like to just stop here for a minute and talk about this technological revolution. I was introduced in 1965 to this thing called a computer when I was a plebe at West Point. They gave me a stack of cards that you punched, and then you took them over to this place called the Computer Center, and you programmed it in something called COBOL. I told the rest of my classmates that this thing didn't make any sense. It would never be successful because I had a slide rule, and I could get to the answers faster with a slide rule than I could by punching these things, taking them over to the computer center, then waiting for a week to get an answer, then having to go back and correct them. This computer thing, I was convinced, would never survive. I am a Luddite. I am a person who wants to live away from computers and cell phones. I like quiet, I like to fish, and cell phones ring and they scare the fish, and I just like to stay away from that kind of stuff. Now, I resist all of that stuff. When my phone rings and it's complicated, I hand it to my granddaughter. She does what she needs to do. She hands it back to me and she explains what she just did, and that's fine. She cannot figure out, however, how I can find my way around the city without a GPS. That's the difference between my daughter and I. When I drove down here for 320 miles, I'm a person who hates computers and all of that stuff. I brought my office laptop, my personal laptop, my office cell phone, my personal cell phone, my tablet, and a GPS. Now, this is a person who does not like that kind of stuff. I took a trip to Hilton Head a week ago. By the time I got back to my house, my cell phone and my computer were full of offers about sales on trips to Hilton Head, hotels at Hilton Head. Somebody is reading my email somewhere, and it makes me very uncomfortable, but it's clear to me that the revolution is here. Now, on the issue of defense, this concept of a battlefield. And this is someone who hasn't been near a battlefield for a long time. But I'm trying to figure out how I would explain to my grandfather that the new battlefield is not something you can see. It's out there in space, and everybody is connected. And if I want to defeat the enemy, rather than buying a new tank, all I need to do is figure out how to cut everything off. Cut off the electricity, cut off the water, cut off the GPS. Their planes are connected to their tanks, who are connected to soldiers walking around with little boxes on their belts, and I can blind them all without leaving my house or without leaving a building, and I don't even have to be on the same continent. I can come in, have a latte, kick back, and cut the lights off and the water off. 8,000 miles away. Now, that's a complete flip in the way to think about this idea of being prepared to defend the country and to defend the commercial markets of this country. And you young people are the people who are going to have to figure out how to do that. Now, just one or two other quick observations. You can't get there from here. If you don't have the elementary and secondary school administrators in the room with you when you're talking about solving this problem, you can't get here. You can't get there from here. You got to have the colleges and the universities in the room with you. You've got to have the private sector in the room with you. They've got to be very active. And you've got to have the defense industry in the room with you if you're going to solve the problem. If you don't have all four of those, you can't get there from here. I'm a former school board president. You do not create engineers by intervening in the 12th grade. You just don't do it. That light bulb has to come on in the 4th and 5th grade, and it has to be supported. I'd like to talk about HBCUs for one more minute. If I ask you what you thought, we know. You talk to the Secretary of DHS, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of the State Department. They know that the diversification of the workforce is a central element of the defense of this country. And if you push people in the commercial area, they know that if they intend to develop the workforce that's necessary to be competitive on an international basis, two things are going to have to take place. Diversification of the workforce in two ways. There is right now a growing feminization of the workforce. If you don't have a better, deeper use of both genders in this battle, then you're trying to fight it with one hand tied behind your back, and it just doesn't work. Without women everywhere in the workforce, you can't get there from here. Now, HBCUs have an interesting characteristic, and that is when you look at the population of these campuses, 65-70% of the population is female, and that's something that looks a little different than most other campuses. But to sort of wrap up, when we take a look at investments in these institutions, I've read to you what kind of production we get out of these campuses, even though they make up less than 3% of the institutions in this country. I took a look at some numbers last night that indicated to me that the federal investment in computer sciences at HBCUs was about $23 million last year. Think about that. The total investment in HBCUs in science and technology in 2012 was about $400 million. That may seem like a lot of money to you until you talk about 100 institutions. I will just cite one other thing and then leave it for you to think about. I'm looking at investment in all HBCUs. There's another number I wanted to share with you. 23 million in math and science, $23 million. These numbers are coming from the National Science Foundation that track federal expenditures. in all of our institutions of higher education. And I guess my point is that if you've got to grow a competent workforce, particularly in this area with sophisticated skills, the investment's got to be there. And if the investment is not there, you will not be able to get there from here. Many of these HBCUs, like Fayetteville State, and like those you'd find in Alabama, and like those you would find in the Norfolk area and the Washington, D.C. area, are located within a stone's throw of our defense institutions. And people drive by each other each day without acknowledging the fact that there's a huge opportunity for mutual support in meeting the national, in meeting our national interest. And we ought to think more about that. So this, I think Dr. Anderson, Dr. Charles, and those of you who have worked on putting this conference together give us an enormous opportunity to begin to look at how these resources can be shared, how they can be brought together in support of our national objectives, and we can solve a problem so that the next time we have the question, we will be able to get here from there. There's one other answer, and then you'll figure out the question. The answer is because that's where the money is. Now, when they caught Willie Sutton in 1952, the famous bank robber, they asked Mr. Sutton, "Why do you rob banks?" Mr. Sutton said, "Because that's where the money is." Now, if we are going to work on this national problem, given the amount of money, and I could read to you numbers that would stagger you in terms of, let me just do this very quickly. 87% of the funding that goes to HBCUs comes from 3 agencies. The largest is the Agriculture Department. The second largest is Health and Human Services, and the third largest is the National Science Foundation. The reason Agriculture Department is the largest is because there's something called the 1890s program, which legislatively directs money specifically to institutions that have an agricultural function. Without it, USDA would not be the largest funder. The reason HHS is number 2 is because there are congressional programs that direct money specifically to hospitals. And even though there are only 3 HBCU medical programs, the size of the awards raises HHS to number 2. And with number 3, National Science Foundation, Congress has directed funding to HBCUs through the HBCU Up program and LSAM program. The point I'm trying to make is if we recognize the problem, and we recognize that it's an efficient investment, and we recognize what kind of return we're getting on that investment. What I've got to say about this issue, the cybersecurity and the diversification of our workforce, is that if we understand what the problem is, we've got the funding to support it, why don't we do what rational people would do? And that is make the investments in places where we get a very high return. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Schluter.
Good morning, and thank you, Fayetteville State University, for inviting me. The other FSU, my son went to FSU. You may be wondering why I'm up here. I was sort of a last-minute replacement for Major General retired Napper who retired out of the U.S. Cyber Command J5, and I'm a retired Army colonel. I spent nearly 30 years of my life enabling the maneuver commander to, as General Kilgo said, put steel on target, close with and destroy the enemy, and really to help them to create that unfair fight. So as a signal officer, I had quite a diverse career, working everything from tactical level all the way up to strategic and operational. And one of the last jobs that I had was running something called as a director of operations for Joint Task Force Global Network Operations. And while there, I got to manage the DoD networks, the service network operations and security centers, all took guidance and direction from me. And I will tell you, about 2 weeks into the job, having just come out of theater, spending 2 years as a brigade commander in theater, supporting Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Qatar, Djibouti, K2 airfield at one point, and getting these directives that came from higher that said, do this and execute it now, and then trying to figure out how do we get there from here with the limited resources that we had. So 2 weeks into the job, there's 6 guys waiting outside of my office at 7 o'clock on Friday afternoon, and they said, sir, you need to sign this right now. I said, what is it? He said, well, we've got a vulnerability that's got to be patched right away. And I said, well, hold on, before I sign that, what do you want me to do? Oh, they've got to patch it within 48 hours. I said, wait a minute. How long? First off, how long have you known about it? Well, we've been working it for about 4 days. Okay, you're wrong there because you didn't tell me about it 4 days earlier. And then I said, how long have we had that vulnerability? Big lump in the throat, 6 months. I said, so what you're telling me is you want me to put a directive out telling units in Iraq and Afghanistan to stop what they're doing, put a kid in an aircraft, put people's lives at risk to go patch this immediately, and we've had the vulnerability for 6 months. We're not going to do that. We're going to give them an appropriate time to figure out how to do it, because if we send them the directive, they're going to go over there and say, well, what's my option since I can't get there? Create a plan of action and milestones that says how you'll get it done, and it'll probably take you anywhere from 3 weeks to 30 days to get it done. So we've got to have a more rational approach to that. So I left, retired from the military a couple of years ago and have gone to work with industry. I'm still very much passionate about the cyber mission and about enabling the warfighter to be able to continue to put steel on target, whether that's from a joint perspective or not. So I want to talk to you just a little bit about what we then focus on in industry, and I will try not to belabor some of the points that have already been made, but I want to approach it really from a different perspective. I really think what you got to do is you got to figure out what do you want to protect. What is critical to enable you to do your mission, and whether that's in the military where it is critical command and control systems, and we've always been able to figure out how to get the mission done. And if that meant that we were getting jammed, we figured out a way to go to an alternate means to do it, because you had no choice. You have to continue to fight. You have to continue to win. And that's the same challenge that we have in the cyber realm. So figuring out what you want to protect, and then you've got that big challenge between access versus security. 12 different passwords just to be able to log on to the different systems within your organization. Or do you encrypt everything or encrypt nothing? Data at rest, laptops, your mobile devices, and the ability to be able to get into your office email, not your Gmail, but your office email, and to use a different encryption technology to ensure that you're protecting the intellectual capital of your organization. And these are things that industry as well as the Department of Defense are struggling with. So we've talked about people, and so I don't have a science, technology, engineering, or math degree. But what I will tell you is I have an aptitude for those kind of things. I have 3 adult children, all with degrees, and they've all got a science, technology, engineering, or math degree. The best soldiers or some of the best soldiers that I've had, when you find them, you got to find people that have aptitude. And we've talked about being able to be a critical thinker, being able to see the whole network. The best troops that I've had, you find them when they're young, and maybe they didn't get the opportunity, but you say, look, I want to help you think about where you can be in 5 years. You got a brilliant mind. We want to move you towards this direction. So some of the best officers or warrant officers that are coming back into the Army, that are working in the cyber career field, are exactly those type of people. So reach out to them. Don't turn them off just because they don't have a degree. It really becomes more about aptitude. And I'm not telling any of you young folks out there to go take a different path. Science, technology, engineering, and math is where you need to go. And if I could have done it over again, that's exactly the way that I would have worked. So when we talk about things like protection, and as I go around to DOD and maybe talking to Navy programs that are dealing with stuff like ballistic missiles or nuclear carriers with weapon system platforms, and they say, it's a closed network. We don't think we're hacked. I said, when you think that, you're probably wrong. You've already been hacked. There's and I want to quote something from, there's a latest Mandiant report that talked about the number of days attackers are present on a victim's network before being discovered in 2014 was 205 days. Now, they were patting themselves on the back saying, hey, it's gone down. It was 229 days in 13, and it was 243 in 12. They're already on your network. And then the other piece is that only about in 2014, and this is again from the Mandiant report, and you can find it, I believe, at mandiant.com, is that only 31% of the organizations that discovered they'd been hacked did it with their own resources. They got told by somebody else that occurred. And so this is no surprise based on what we've seen from Sony, what we've seen from Disney, what we've seen from the attack on Saudi Aramco. It happens after the fact. From a big data analytics perspective, and we are doing quite a bit of this within my company right now, L3, and if any of you saw the 60 Minutes report on a gentleman by the name of DARPA Dan, and you saw the stuff running in the background, DARPA Plan X, that's part of what we work on. So I work with a lot of the big mind PhD folks, and what we allow them to do, they come in and we just give them the data and don't give them any restrictions about what you want them to look at. Tell us what you think the data says. And some of it may make sense. Oh, we saw this big data pull at 3 o'clock in the morning, at 3 a.m. in the morning. Oh my God, somebody got into our network. Well, later on you go back and you say, analyze it, tell us what the outliers are. Nope, that's when we pull the financials down at 3 a.m. in the morning. That's normal behavior. So you can block that out, and then you go try to find those either insider threats or external threats that are going to be able to come in. And part of what we want to get to, we talk about this thing for the warfighter, always situational awareness. So I spent 3 years in the 4th Infantry Division, which was the most modernized division in the Army before we deployed in 2003 to Iraq. And the dynamic you have to have, it's not just situational awareness so you can look at, but it's the ability to step back and to get that situational understanding. And again, to take from looking at a bunch of sensors and understanding what they're telling you. So from sensors to sense making, so you can move on from there. And I know we're getting very close on time, so I'm going to give the rest of my time. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. At this point, I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. In the interest of time, I ask that you keep your question very focused and concise, and ideally you can come up to the microphone or project your voice. So with that, we have somebody?
Hi, my name is Charles Sharp. I'm with the Black Emergency Managers Association, and I'm similar to Dr. Hollis. I've been in IT when I worked for the National Science Foundation when I was 16 years old. What I'm hearing is a top-level information access software. What about on the hardware level? How is each and every one involved in that? There was an incident a while back ago where some software was written at the logic level. the LSI level, the hardware level. How involved in that, and should the young kids get involved, not just in software, but hardware? And that's something I emphasize to you. Yesterday, I spoke at a elementary school, talking to preschool students about space. They're involved in that. We have to go to even that level, preschool level. They understood space. We were talking about oxygen and water, how important water is. So they're understanding that, even at that level, if you put it to them at a level you understand. But really, my main question is at the hardware level. Are you looking at that level also in terms of vulnerabilities?
Just from my perspective, we're going there, but in the near term, we're looking, I agree, most of the vulnerability assessments are happening at the application level, and maybe a little lower in the OSI model. But we're even starting in the near term, just getting a little lower in those applications. And so we're focusing our analysis on assembly code, bit code, and source code versus looking at vulnerabilities at that level versus looking at the vulnerability at the application level. But I agree, we also have to continue to involve at the hardware as well. We're aware of supply chains compromising vulnerabilities as well. We look at the hardware from that standpoint, but we also have to do it from an analytical standpoint. But our first step is to take this software down to the bit code, source code, and assembly code analysis.
Jump in real quick. Well, I am an electrical engineer, so clearly hardware is the foundational piece of all of the information I'm talking about. Okay. So as an electrical engineer, clearly understand that software is not going to run without the hardware side. I think it's important to know that we are developing forensic capabilities that looks at the hardware side, but at the end of the day, that opportunity-based cyber actor out there, the opportunities are so great and so many to aim your capabilities at some of the software vulnerabilities. It would take much more money, time, focus to enter the supply chain. Not that it's not possible, but so we tend to be very focused on the large amount of attacks that could potentially come at us on a daily basis because they can be sitting at home in their pajamas, halfway around the world, and potentially leverage one of those infrastructure. Whereas from a warfighting perspective or from a intrusion perspective, much harder, on the hardware to get it where you need to go, et cetera. Does that help answer? I think you're absolutely right. It's not something we can ignore, and we have to have processes in place in our supply chain to know that we're getting hardware from trusted vendors as opposed to gray market kinds of places, and understanding, what's coming in on the hardware, that may or may not be detectable at the most basic levels.
I would also. All right. I would also like to add that the Department of Defense headquarters is aware that hardware is a potential vulnerability. In fact, we're looking at the supply chain management tools right now in order to make sure that the motherboards, the chips, diodes that are coming into all of our equipment, software, hardware, tools that make up the overall tool or a piece of equipment. We're looking at, we put clauses now, we created new DFARS clauses. For those who are not aware what the DFARS is, it's the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations that actually govern the contracts of which we purchase and buy on. And so we put contracting clauses in place now that actually puts the onus of responsibility on the overall prime contractor to manage and know where each piece of equipment and component that goes into their overall product comes from. And so they have to now work with each of their subcontractors to know the overall location, where it was engineered, where it was made, all the way to the delivery, so the logistics of where it was delivered, to make sure it didn't get stopped at a particular point that it wasn't supposed to, reopen and addressed or tampered with. So we are now putting an onus of responsibility on that. Thank you.
Good morning. Tony Marshall with Innovative Systems Group, and when we look at models for training young people, we see that the Germans have got a very strong apprenticeship model. I'd like to get the panel's thoughts on using that same type of model in the U.S.
All right, I guess I'll start with that one. The department has also put into place what we call the Pathways program, and it's an improvement over what we used to have from an intern program. And it allows us to now bring students in that are coming into college, at the college. So once you register for college and are accepted and begin your freshman year, you can apply for internships, or we call them internships, but they are effectively apprenticeships because they are paid internships for the most part. And we also have non-paid internships throughout the summer, throughout the Department of Defense. So we actually are emphasizing that specifically on STEM students right now, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics students, throughout the department, up at the OSD level, as well as down at the services and various components. So we are not, I won't say we're necessarily mirroring the German model, but we're trying to take that model and improve it 10 times. So I can tell you we are not backing down off of going after our young students and exposing them to what the department does, all of the great tools and opportunities within the department, as well as all of the tough challenges we have to deal with. So we are really trying hard to get to those young minds as often and early as possible.
I'd just like to speak to the issue of internships for a second. Internships seems to be available increasingly across both the private sector and the government sector, but I would just like to point out that particularly for the students who are of interest to HBCUs and other institutions that have large portions of students with low income, we find the fact that these internships are unpaid acts as a barrier to someone who has to work their way through college. I'm the oldest of 9 kids, and I knew that if I wanted to get through school, I had to work. I would have loved to have taken opportunity of some of these internships, but as I talk to young, bright folks, they tell me they have to work through the summer. So we really have to think about, for our brightest youngsters, for whom income is a problem, whether or not the provision of these extraordinary internships, but that happen to be unpaid, make a problem for someone who has to move to Washington, D.C., to Chicago or Atlanta for the summer, but does not have the ability to do that and help the family back home and then pay for your tuition coming up in the next semester. So we really have to think about how we get youngsters of all abilities, but of all income levels and cultural groups to be able to participate in some of these opportunities.
Let me just make one kind of something I probably should have said earlier, but when we talk about what we need as it relates to all of these programs. So one of the things to the youngsters, what I tell you is you must stay out of trouble, because I have to be able to put you on the network. If you are getting in trouble and doing things, I can't vet you, we can't get you cleared, we can't put you on the network. So you have to be able to obtain a clearance to do really the hard work that we want you to do. And so I can't stress that enough. Pick your friends carefully. Be with the right type of people that has the same vision and goals that you have, and grind it out and stay out of trouble so that we can bring you on and put you to work on these problems. Absolutely. Watch social media.
Good morning. Roger Hathaway, NASA Langley Research Center. I concur with all of you in terms of if we are to develop an engineer, we should reach him at the early years. But I just have a comment, and I'm interested in your feedback. And that is, as we think about preparing students at those early years, we cannot help but think about the preparation of existing and future teachers, okay, who in many cases do not have that math background. So I would encourage that we all begin taking a look at strategies, looking at how we can assist our HBCUs who are known for teacher education and better preparing future teachers. I know that NASA made the investment a few years ago. We have had some great success. We even had Fayetteville State actively involved in our pre-service initiatives. And at every NASA center, we're doing pre-service activities with HBCUs and other students with the focus on elementary and middle school teachers. Any comments? Thank you.
I'll jump on that as a person who comes from a family of educators, mostly in the high school and below level. That was exactly my thought when I was listening to Mr. Hollis talk. If we're going to bring the administrators from primary and secondary schools in, we've got to bring the people who create the teachers. And, I know how difficult it has been for our high schools and middle schools to find people who have natural interest in math and science to get into the classroom. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. We probably need to have some focused effort on what is our strategy for building that part of the workforce that then is going to be able to stimulate our young people in the science and technology areas.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We only have a couple more minutes, so I ask that you gentlemen keep it very brief.
All right, I'm Brian Thompson. I'm the Cumberland County STEM teacher assigned with the Agora students. Our assumed pipeline that we look at these for the future of these kids would be go to a university and get a degree. Of course, being saddled with $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 plus of debt and an uncertain job market. While I'm serving as a teacher now, I served as an electrician's mate in the reactor department of USS John C. Stennis. And while I was getting my training, I had all my needs taken care of. I was able to raise a family. I got a job training immediately, and I was able to get into the business within 2 years. So my question for specifically the military people on the panel, what kind of pipeline can we show to our students other than the assumed university level job search market, and how soon could they get active working in the field?
I think that's easy. The Army motto now is Army Strong. Before that, it was be all you can be. We won't even talk about the Army at one because it was actually out there for a while. But, this is critically important. And in my comments, I talked about enlisted as well as officers. And we assume that our officers take the path of university. But that's not the path all of them take. A lot of them enlist in the Army and come in and they get into these technical fields. The technical field in all of the services, but specifically in the Army dealing with signal intelligence, cyber, and some of these other things requires a very high aptitude coming in. You have to have that STEM background in order to test, to qualify for most of what we call military operational skills to get that. And then once you're in there, you're in those jobs, and these are a lot of folks that I see in our environment within Forces Command, and they're doing that job every day. They're doing a whole lot of other things as well, but they are honing that skill set on the network. One of the things Colonel Bray is going to leverage, and we're going to leverage in the forces, is from the enlisted side, is our 25 Delta Force. And those are our cyber operators that'll be in the force working, doing cyber operations, really at core, echelons core and below, as well as at the strategic level in those cyber mission and protection teams. And then they have opportunities, they get benefits that you talk about, where they can then go and get an education later and go to a university, or they can choose to take get an education on their own, go to officer candidacy school, or go to warrant officer candidacy school and become a warrant officer and a technician that will do that for the rest of their career. So, but it still starts with that foundation that we must have, and then it's up to the student's choice to decide what path to take. But there is a viable path for both directions.
Thank you very much.
I have to put the Navy plug in because he described it. So probably since you left the Navy, we've created a new rating called Cryptologic Technician Networks.
Okay.
And so they work together with our information technology rating for enlisted, that can be directly enlisted, where our IT side is doing those things to reduce our attack surface and participating in the defense of our network. And our Cryptologic Technicians Network work across a range of defend, exploit, and attack. And so we have training pipelines for them, in addition to the ROTC type opportunities, NROTC type opportunities, and Naval Academy type opportunities, where we've established a cyber curriculum now at the Naval Academy, building a cyber center, and we are now directly commissioning officers into the Information Dominance Corps, which includes the cyber field and my previous field in information warfare. So there's lots of paths that you can take. The key is, on your skills and ability today in science and math. And back to the other point, with respect to the different types of degrees you might pursue, it is computer science, it is electrical engineering, it is mathematics for the encryption problems that IBM needs to solve. But it's also, there are material sciences associated with the hardware in chip building and in designing routers, and the hardware side of it is also a big deal to our nation. So there's a range of opportunities out there that we have.
There are two other areas. I know you want to move on, but there are at least two other areas we can look at profitably. One is young men and women who are just ready to leave the service in terms of relationships with the local universities. You can reach into that group just as they're getting ready to leave, to do some preparation, get certification. The other is you can look at the Veterans Administration and programs that are being supported, both for wounded warriors and others who are coming out of this service. The National Science Foundation has a real interest in looking at those youngsters who are leaving the military as a real pool for those people who have some experience but who just need an upgrading or short-term education. They're not looking for 4 or 5 years. They may need only 1 or 2 years, but that's a real rich pool that we need to give a little bit more attention to. Also, take a look at ROTC, both at the high school level and the college level. There are real opportunities to work together closely with universities and community colleges in the area that would be profitable, I think.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Last very quick question, please.
Ladies and gentlemen of the panel, thank you very much for coming today, and I'm honored to be the last speaker here. But if I may, I do have somewhat of a two-part question. And
Actually, as a reminder, everybody is free to engage the panelists after we conclude this panel as well. Please.
The first is what percentage of insider threat versus unknown adversaries are we looking at on the networks, both Department of Defense and otherwise, if anybody has any comment. And the second is most of the panelists spoke about defensive strategy. I assume many networks have implemented IDS systems, but what do we look at as far as the opposing force that the Department of Defense may want to incorporate? And are we looking to see some type of operational consequence, i.e. something very similar to, I don't know, for example, Stuxnet in the past as that opposing force from the Department of Defense standpoint?
Thank you.
I'll answer the first question. I would say that in terms of the types of actors, I won't say I'm seeing in my network, because my goal is to not allow them into my network. The types of actors that we are seeing in cyberspace, I think predominantly what you have out there are those that are for-profit, right? Criminal, the large number of people trying to make money because that's where the money is, right? And then you do have your nation state actors, but that we are focused on. But again, when those adversaries are potentially knocking on the door, trying to gain access to DoD networks, you don't necessarily know who they are at that moment, and it doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that they don't gain that access. On the insider threat, I think how we think of it is that threat is much smaller in quantity, but the risks are so much higher because they have been granted, potentially protected access. And so we have an awful lot of programs going on to sort of get after detection and monitoring for the insider threat piece of the problem. But some of those programs are still rolling out in terms of a technological perspective, but the numbers are vastly, vastly smaller on the insider threat problem. But the potential outcome is much greater.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for all the very thoughtful questions. Thank you, all of the panelists, for all of your insights, sharing your perspectives with us. Before we depart, I would like to invite up Dr. Charles here to be recognized by General Kilgo and myself on behalf of the Military Cyber Professionals Association. We'd like you to present you with our medal to show that appreciation. Thank you, sir.
So real quickly, just as a thank you, it takes a whole lot to do this, to have a vision. I know a lot of people are behind you pushing to make these types of things happen, but from the industry, from the military, from academia, and all those who support the STEM and cyber environment, just a small token to say thanks for what you do.
Thank you all very much.
So I'm going to, before we adjourn, I'm going to just give some directions. And if I could piggyback, if you could give the panel another round of applause, please.